My name's Greg Hawkins. My experience happened in, I think it was 2000. I was bow hunting for deer in Carroll County off of Canyon Road. It was getting close to dark. I was down in this valley, and I thought, well, I might as well start walking out because it's a pretty far walk out. So I gathered up my gear and I bow hunt with traditional archery equipment, which means old stuff, Robin Hood stuff. And all else I had on me was my backpack and my knife. And I heard what I thought was like a giggle, childish giggle, in the area below me, in the swampy area. And I thought there was a farmhouse near there. And I thought it was maybe some of their kids that had gotten in the swamp and was stuck. I walked a little closer and I got up on this tree stump of a fallen tree that it fall over, and they'd cut a little bit of it off so the stump was nice and squared off to get on. I got up on top of it and started listening a little closer, and I was met with, like, the best way I can describe it is like a bull grunt, like a cow, like a hum. And it had a lot of decibels to it because I could feel it hit me, and I'm like, what the heck was that? So I thought maybe I better get back up the hill a ways. I had a long way to walk, so I started making my way back up the hill towards the fence I had to climb over. So I walked most of the hill backwards because I didn't know what that was. And it was just an odd, you don't hear things like that out there. Not in Ohio anyway. And I'm thinking, for safety's sake, because I just got a little bit nervous. I've been hunting since I was 5, but it's like, that's odd. So I walked up the hill backwards part of the way, and then I turned around and crossed the fence, and I got my binoculars out and started looking where the noise is coming from. It was such thick brush down in there, I couldn't see anything. So I heard some stuff not to my right in the other part of the woods that was like breaking sticks, something moving. So I got my stuff together, put my binoculars away, and started heading back towards my Jeep. And I noticed the noises are still over here. You know, now it's on the opposite side as I'm walking. So facing this way, it was over here. Walking, it was on my left. And I would go a little bit and stop, and I would hear a couple steps, and it was bipedal. So like maybe it's somebody that was hunting down here, but I was the only one that ever had permission. So, and I hadn't seen anyone. I was always pretty keen to keep an eye on what's going on around me. And I was uneasy, so I kept making my way towards where my vehicle was at, which is a pretty good haul, probably half a mile or more. And I keep going, I keep hearing the pacing, keep going, keep hearing the pacing. Well, there was a point of the woods that came out into the field. And I had the feeling that whatever was going that way was going to ambush me there. Just odd feeling. So I went farther out in the field away from that point of woods and started running. I'm not built for running, but I made my way back to my Jeep. When I got there, I was pretty well dark. Flipped my headlights on and didn't see anything. So that was my experience. I never hunted there again. It shook me pretty bad.
The year was 1956. The place, Harrison Hot Springs, British Columbia. A man named John Green was in his second year of owning and operating the local newspaper. Having grown up in Vancouver, Green had heard stories about Sasquatch and had even published a light-hearted April Fool's Day story about the legendary figure, but never expected to meet someone who took the subject seriously. That is, until a Swiss immigrant by the name of René de Hinden showed up at his office, seeking information that might enable him to actually find a Sasquatch. Green was stunned, and by his own admission felt sorry for the would-be Bigfoot hunter. Little did Green know that he would be pulled into de Hinden's quest. inadvertently setting a paradigm for the modern search for Sasquatch. At the moment, all the newspaperman knew was that he had a great story to tell about an earnest, eccentric individual he had met that day. Now, nearly 70 years later, it's difficult to say whether the deliberate search for Sasquatch is more or less mainstream. It's certainly more publicly discussed than ever before, even if still viewed by some as a fringe topic. Among those who have been attracted to a Dahinden-like quest, there are certain techniques that have been employed in hopes of making a world-changing discovery, methods that are still in use today.
Some people can hit the woods and go out and look for broken trees, structures, tracks. Other people can hit the computer and look for old newspaper reports. They can talk to like rural mail carriers, people who drive back roads a lot, get some insight that way. Ask around. Not everybody's capable of going out there and going up and down the hills. You hear the term like keyboard warrior, you sit in the house and, well, not everybody can get out and do that. I think you can find out a lot. If you can find out there was reports from an area that took place years ago, I feel that unless something has drastically changed in that area, if they could have been seen 40 years ago in that spot, they could be seen today, unless something has really changed that spot.
Basic techniques for searching for Sasquatch include, your eyes are always down on the ground looking for tracks, especially in places that you would expect to find them, like riverbeds near creeks and streams. Other research might simply entail going camping and setting up shop in the woods in one consistent location for a couple days or a little bit longer, and letting whatever gets curious come in to you. I think recently it's been suggested that's one of the best ways that you can do field research is by apparently not doing any. It's almost Zen-like in that sense. You do the best research when you're not trying to do research, but just being out there and letting things that are curious about what we might be come in and take a look. But you're always going to be talking about, I think, data collection, so hair samples, having recording devices running to capture whatever you might hear or see has become a standard. Game cameras, although they seem to notoriously not catch what we're looking for, just making all those sort of attempts to get some sort of reaction.
Be out in the woods. That's it. One spot's almost as good as another, and if you're inside, it's not going to happen unless you live in the house and it comes and looks at you through the window at the fish tank. But besides that, doesn't happen very often, so you have to be outside.
Basically, you just need to find an area where there have been other sightings before to start with. That's the easiest thing to do. And of course, you go to, the BFRO website and see where there's a grouping of sightings. And then just start looking around. Where's the water? Where are the tree lines? Where's the game running? Where are the game trails? And I don't think it's terribly useful to just run through the woods trying to find them, because you're never going to catch them. What I think is worked the best is by just staying seated in one place, like a camp, setting up camp and being interesting to them. Play good music, cornhole, whatever games, laughing, food, cook that bacon, let it, waft through, lights, all kinds of stuff like that. And then, it's not going to happen on the first night. And it might not happen on the second night, but usually it's like the third night, or if you stay after the whole camp leaves, they're around. It's always a little bit later. So I think if you get to, hang out for a couple days, and then just, just be quiet. If you want to march off away from the camp, that's the good thing to do, where you can actually hear. Because if people start, hooping and hollering and all that kind of stuff, and then you can't hear what they're doing. But if you've got a noisy group of campers, and then you go off, eighth of a mile away, that's the sweet spot right there.
Audio recorders, if you can afford it, things like a parabolic dish is good. Stuff that, we have thermal and we have all that, but not everybody can afford that. So if you're gonna go out just at your basic, you need at least a good audio recorder, I'd say, a good camera, and patience, lots and lots and lots of patience.
Well, if you're going to an area where there's no known reports, I would just take a video camera, an audio recorder. Do not announce to anyone that you're going there. First off, if you're going to an area where there's known alleged activity, that's fine. Just make sure you're not trespassing on somebody's property, because everybody owns a gun. You don't want to explain to the people in the hospital why you got shot in the leg. But just make sure you're taking an audio recorder and a video recorder, and have some plaster of Paris or whatever handy. And don't, like I said earlier, don't try every technique in the book to try and draw a Bigfoot into you. Look, if there's a Bigfoot in the area and it's passing through, if it wants itself known, you're gonna know it. And if it doesn't, you're not. Ask someone that's been researching for a long time, i.e. me. How many times do you think that I've walked in the woods with heavy foliage on the trees, or in a group of pine trees or whatever, that there could have been one of these things within 100 yards of me? I have no idea.
Researchers have, over time, learned specific strategies that tend to be the norm when out in the field. And those strategies are often more caught than taught, picked up by example. Even in something as unlikely as an organized pursuit of Sasquatch, a set of unwritten rules emerge, or a conventional wisdom develops around techniques that have sometimes produced results. Identifying the unwritten rules is an illuminating exercise, and can reveal much about those conducting the research.
So if you find them, and they're usually by the water and where there's good food sources, they'll come out in the day and they'll get the deer, and they do like farms and animals like that. But an unwritten rule is, if you find their inner sanctum, which I call their nest, don't go into it, okay? They have children as well. My one friend, Matthew Sexton, he had just crawled out of his tent one time. He said there was, and I believe it to be a mother. I believe sometimes a mother can be bigger than the males. And he said he was crawling out of his tent, and there, what I believe was a mother, and she was as big as a rhinoceros, he said, and she was holding on to her young one. And as soon as he came out, she kind of scooted the young one closer to her. He said he just put his head down and just kind of moved back into the tent. So don't go into their nest, because it would be like walking into a house, just bursting into somebody's house who's got kids and a family. You're likely to get shot here in America. Well, you're likely to get killed if you go walking in and they perceive you as a threat.
Unwritten rules. My number one thing, if you're going to do this, you got to be prepared to have some gut-wrenching, mind-boggling experiences. I don't recommend it. I really don't. I was at a networking meeting, a couple ladies there last night. They want to go. They want to go camp. They want to have that experience. And, all right, be careful what you wish for. Quite honestly, I don't know where I'd be now if this weren't a part of my life. I'd probably be doing something else, but I'm grateful that it is. I try to be constructive with what I have. And number one, you just cannot fear. You can't have fear. A dog can sense your fear, right? These beings, I believe, have abilities well beyond the abilities of your average canine. And you need to be aware of that. Be aware that they are watching. They like to do that. They watch.
And so that being the case, you've got to be prepared for every possibility. Like I said before, you get out of your car, you better make sure that that audio recorder is recording within 30 seconds of the fact that your feet hit the ground. Because chances are one day you're going to get out of the car, you're going to hear the noise of a lifetime, and you're going to say, oh shoot, is that recording button? Is that what that's for? You know, how are you going to explain what it sounds like to begin with? And second of all, who's going to believe you? You're a hardcore researcher, you get out of your car, your recorder is not recording, you hear the best sound of your life. Well, I'm sorry, I forgot to hit the record button. How do I explain that? You know, seriously. Well, you know what I would do if that happened to me? Put the stuff away in the closet and not do it again. Because you just missed the opportunity of a lifetime to get the best sound you've ever heard in your life in the forest. Why? It's not that difficult to hit a record button. You know what I'm saying? That's the kind of stuff I used to keep me awake at night. Now I don't care. Because if anybody gets out of their car and they hear the noise and then they were trying to explain to me that they heard the noise, I got a guy that lives outside of Newcomerstown that every now and then he says, well, I heard something out in the woods the other day. Found some footprints the other day out in the woods near Salt Fork. Those are interesting looking footprints. How long are they? About the size of my foot. Where's your tape measure? What's so difficult about carrying a tape measure and laying it beside a track? If you're going into the woods to look for footprints and you ain't got a tape measure? I've got a $1 bill in my pocket. Can't you lay it down beside the track to show me what the size of it is? These are the kind of things that you're not advancing research by not holding a tape measure beside a footprint. You're knocking it down a notch because there's no way to know what the size of it is. I mean, there's so many things. How many people do you actually think get down on their hands and knees and look at one footprint in a series of tracks? And I guarantee you, if Hendon and Green were still alive, they'd tell you they did this. Get down on your hands and knees and look at tracks one at a time and see if you can find dermal ridges on it. And then again, ask researchers if they know what dermal ridges are.
Never lead your witness. And when I say never lead your witness, you know, for example, let's just say you're telling me that you saw, I've been looking at this creature and it was 7 foot tall, and I'd say, and its hair was hanging from its arms. And you'd say, oh yes, and its eyes were big and dark, like coal. Yes, you're leading the witness into going over-exaggerating over what they saw. When you see a Bigfoot, it's so quick, it's such a fleet moment that your mind can't even process because you're going through shock half the time. So, you know, like I say, I think the biggest thing, never lead your witness in investigation. Let them spill it all out. And I'm sure you guys get reports because of small town monsters. So they're gonna submit you a report, tell you what happened. If I have that, I study that. And then when say I'm the witness, first thing the two of you should say to me is tell me your story, but don't ever interject until they're done. Because you know the notes, you know what they said, and all of a sudden it's just something just totally off the guardrail. Red flag, red flag. And there you can clean up that report. And then let's just say I told you everything I emailed you. Then you should have your list of questions. Like, okay, well, what about this? What about the color? What about that? How long was this? I mean, then you get all that extra details that then builds the picture even more. And you'll find your report quality, or of any kind of incident, if it's paranormal, whatever, you're gonna get a lot more quality data. And that's the important thing. You might not get as many reports, but at least the ones you have are quality, and that's what you want.
Over the years, the search for Sasquatch has gone through many changes. Ideas from both scientific and supernatural sources have vied for popularity, offering persuasive, explanatory perspectives and a framework for investigating the phenomena. Some changes have been more practical in nature, driven by technological advances that allow for unprecedented exploration and collection of data. The past few decades have seen many such advancements, each of them adding to a growing body of research.
Newer techniques introduced in the last few decades would have to include the use of the FLIR, or the infrared camera, to try to detect heat signatures and so forth. And that's been used in some cases to very good effect. It certainly gives you a different idea about the woods as you're looking around and what things trap and conduct heat. Other new school techniques would also have to include the use of drones where those are allowable. And also, I think technology has made call blasting a possibility, where you're taking a known recording or the recording of something else like a baby crying, and through the use of a loudspeaker projecting that out to see what potential reaction that might entail.
Well, I mean, different software for audio continues to change and to get better and better. You have eDNA along with regular DNA collection. You have, is it called LiDAR? You get the footprints and you can scan it and get a 3D image of footprints. Drones are big now, which we didn't have, or at least, a lot of people I know didn't have not that long ago. So drones flying around. Yeah, you can go kind of old school. I always call myself the Grandma Gatewood of Bigfooting because I don't have a lot of tech and things like that. So I'm just out there traipsing around, But yeah, pheromone chips are something that's been around for a little while. Ape pheromone chips that you can put up in the trees. And we've had some success with that, getting some weird sounds and a footprint near there when I was out west. So sometimes less is more, I think.
Sure, I like just all the technology. Sure, we have the overhead, sometimes you'll get the satellite or the overhead from a helicopter. I like the thermal vision the best. The infrared, I say go for it all. That's what I do, because you never know when you're gonna catch one off guard. But really, there's gotta be a biological aspect. You do need to find physical evidence, like footprints, like tree structures, because a bad side of this is now we've got too many people thinking that every little shadow in a tree line is a Bigfoot, because the digital cameras, you can zoom in. If I zoomed into that curtain right now, I could probably find a Bigfoot face in that. And so I get it with the aspect of cloaking, though. I understand that. But it doesn't mean that every dark shadow in the tree line is a Bigfoot.
Trail cams aren't usually successful, but I still put them out when I'm camping. I got one I'd check on every couple months in a very urban area, and I've just been lucky it hasn't been stolen yet. I don't have someday I'll have a cellular trail camera. I can just check it through my phone. But
drones right now are very popular. The night vision, the FLIR units, the different recorders, different cameras, telephoto lenses. Technology's just brought all kinds of things out that we couldn't have even dreamed of years ago.
One of the things that I know is newer to me is casting in the snow. Like I didn't think you were able to do it, but you can, and you can use forensics wax. And yeah, exactly. See, I didn't know this either. The forensics wax, basically when you get a print in the snow, you take the forensics wax and you do one quick real light coating on it and let it set. And the wax will actually harden, then you do another layer, it'll harden, do another layer, so you got a nice thick layer, and then you pour your plaster into that and it actually creates the mold from that. So you actually don't have to worry about the snow melting, and you can actually get a track out of the snow. Now, is it 100%? No, but it does work on really good tracks. So if you got a good track, you can cast it.
I mean, as far as technology goes, as the price comes down, an average person can get and handle that more and afford that versus back in the old days. And, as any new research techniques, I think we just build off of other people and we figure out what works for us, and we pick and choose what you work for. Like what will work here in Ohio, I don't think will work in Oregon. I mean, here in Ohio, we try not to Bigfoot during full moon phases or anything like that. Where out west, because they have a lot more space, that they'll go out and have stuff happen, where I've hardly ever had anything happen during a full moon, kind of thing. So population pressures, I don't know, but that would be my guess. But I think we just pick and choose what works for you, how you think, and what works for me and how I do things might not be what other people do. So, I mean, one's as good as another.
Throughout decades of Bigfoot research, there have been cases in which field investigation techniques have yielded intriguing results. Hair samples have been gathered, photos have been obtained, audio recorded, and, when conditions allow, detailed prints have been cast. It's one thing to consider an eyewitness account, and another to evaluate a concrete sample of evidence that demonstrates the existence of a physical being. In the heartland of the United States, this evidence has taken a number of forms.
Ohio has a long history as far as that goes. I mean, hair, still none of it's ever been chronologically proven, but their hairs come out of Ohio for different studies. Matt Moneymaker's Howl, which was seminal for that. You have now one of the longest documented track lines ever is in the state of Ohio by B. Mills in southern Ohio. So yeah, I think Ohio's added to the evidence for the probability of this animal existing.
There are a lot of track finds, I think, that have been pretty persuasive. The most famous or notorious is the Ohio Howl, I would have to say. That recording was obtained in Columbiana County, and that's come to really be an emblem for what Bigfoot is supposed to sound like. It's almost the gold standard of Bigfoot audio that people will utilize, and they, in part because that's what they've come across when they've searched for it online. So that goes hand in hand, you know, with technology. You could make a case that the internet itself was a game changer in putting evidence and data in front of anyone who had a connection so that they could go in and search for Bigfoot audio or Bigfoot howl, and in almost every case the Ohio howl is going to come up as an example, and they can say either, well, that's not what I heard, or that's exactly what I heard. And so isn't that, you know, now what? What do I do with that information? But the Ohio howl, I think, more than any other one piece of obtained evidence has stood the test of time.
Yeah, plenty of audio all along Adams County, Scioto County, up in Pickaway County, up in Summit County, up in Cuyahoga Valley National Park, Columbiana County audio, tracks in Belmont County, tracks in Fairfield County, some pretty good tracks I would think over in Adams County, and that's just some stuff. There's been hair samples collected over in Columbiana County that were sent off years ago to Dr. Fehrenbach that he thought was a potential as being a match as what he considered a Sasquatch back in the day. So there has been a lot of evidence, especially the audio evidence. Tracks not as so often because you have to think about something. What is our soil makeup in Ohio? Clay shale. Clay shale is not going to hold prints long. It's not going to be like the Pacific Northwest where you have very soft soil, it's lots of sandbars. So you have to be very lucky to find a line of Bigfoot tracks in Ohio, especially a discernible line. You know, obviously there's the Don Keating videos. There's a video that I took that was terrible, but you know, it was there. And there's been some other stuff here and there that could be. There's one from up in Harrison County, and you know the people won't share it, but I don't know if they've ever showed it to you, where the hand reaches by the game camera. It's a gray-haired creature. You can see the huge palm. I saw it once over at Wills Creek. The guy had the birthday video where they were out on the deck celebrating the birthday. You see this thing stand up and walk up the hill right back there in Wills Creek, and everyone's screaming and everything. So there is some stuff, but the biggest problem is it was old VHS and, you know, some of this poor or a crappy cell phone. I mean, let's face it, when you turn your cell phone video camera on, it's great when you're sitting stationary to say, hey, look in the camera. But when something's moving and you're panicking and moving, come on. People, what's the first thing people are going to say? Oh, yeah, that's Photoshop.
There was a case in, I believe it was either Harrison or Columbiana County. A gentleman contacted me back in the 90s. It was on the backside of his mother's property. and it was apparently in old mining territory where there had been some high walls, or there are some high walls, and he went into this area because he was scouting the area out to see where he could do deer hunting. And he went into the area and he was looking at trees to see if he could put a tree stand on them. And he found this one tree wherein there was what he described as a muddy handprint on the side of the tree. The handprint wasn't like this, it was horizontal. The fingers were horizontal. And he could see all 5 of the all 4 of the fingers and the thumb. And he said it was a reddish mud that it'd be like you walking along and then all of a sudden you just stop and put your hand on the tree to balance yourself or whatever. And when he seen this, he discovered a large tuft of hair that was reddish in color. And he saved it, and he gave it to me. And at that point in time, I knew 2 people, Dr. Henner Fehrenbach at the Oregon Regional Primate Research Center, and Blake Matthews from West Mansfield, Ohio, or over in Central Ohio somewhere. I'm not sure what town he lives in or did live in. I knew both of those guys could stick this under a microscope and do some analytical work and see what it was closest to as compared to what they knew. And both of them came back. It's similar to this, but it's not identical to this, and I don't know what it is.
The natural world, for all its majesty and beauty, requires caution and planning on the part of those traveling into remote areas of wilderness. There are obvious dangers that warrant attention, such as rugged terrain, but sometimes there are more subtle threats with which to contend. Out in the elements, a mystery primate may be the least of your concerns.
Don't go by yourself. Or if you do, make sure you know the Sasquatch clan. But the dangers here in Michigan, it's always it's wild animals. You can't just go out. You've got to bring your bear spray. I'm not into shooting these things, and some people may disagree, because I heard a story in the UP where the Sasquatch clan was just watching the human family, and then the one member of the family shot at him, and it didn't end nicely for that family. So, but be aware of wild animals. They're more of your threat, the bears, the cougars.
Absolutely, there are dangers to going out in the field. When I started on this, I was so naive. And I'm sure in a lot of ways I still am. But I'm thinking of some different examples. And I'm talking about dangers like human dangers, things like that. So I remember I had taken my daughter camping, and she was still a teenager at that time. And we had gone out on a night hike and came back to where we had put our tent, and you had to park a little bit of a way away from the tent. We were the only ones out there, and something stopped me from going all the way to the tent, and I'm like, Anna, get back into the car. And so we slept in the car because something just didn't seem right. The next morning, I didn't sleep very well, and I woke her up to say we could go back over to the tent now because it was light, and try to get some more sleep. And we get there and there were cigarette butts all around the outside of our tent. And I still don't know if I smelled something or if I, heard something, I don't know, but that kind of danger. So I've always been a good shot, used to target shoot and stuff with my brothers when I was a kid, but that's when I became more trained, got my concealed carry and all that kind of thing, because I do usually carry a weapon when I'm out there, especially if I'm by myself, but it's for people, not Bigfoot. So that kind of danger.
Some of the dangers of field investigation are just the simple sort of cautions that any outdoors activity would also entail, which is to say, the danger of exposure and hypothermia if you don't have the adequate protection for the weather changes that you might encounter. In Ohio as elsewhere, weather can change pretty rapidly, and you can go from a 70-degree day to a 40-degree day over the course of just a number of hours. And if you're not prepared for that, that can not only be an inconvenient situation, it can be a dangerous situation.
And if you haven't put any real preparation into that, it can be dangerous as well. Like if you're going out to do a night investigation and you're dressed all in cotton and you just got all of got on your cotton wear, you have a real potential for hypothermia. So you have to look into this as you would if you were a hiker, if you were an outdoorsman or a hunter, and really know what you're doing out in the field. I think another danger of being out in the field on the hunt is distraction. And what I mean by that is, if you've got a FLIR up to your eye and you're scanning the perimeter and you're walking at night, it wouldn't take much to step into a hole, and all of a sudden you're talking about a severe injury or stepping over a cliff, and now you're not just injured, but you could, that could potentially lethal. So the distractions that are easily had, are just, you hear something, you're startled, somebody takes off running sort of involuntarily. That's a very dangerous situation if you don't know where you are. And chances are you're bushwhacking it, looking for Bigfoot. You're not just walking down a road that's nicely paved. So you just have to be aware of your surroundings at all times.
What are some of the dangers of doing field investigation?
Besides death, because I always, because I tell people, like, one of the things you won't catch me doing very often is I don't go out after dark, like in like a lot of areas, because some of the areas like I've been to during the day, there are deadfalls everywhere. Meaning like there's limbs that are widowmakers. Like if you're walking in the middle of the night and one of those come down, you're done. And some of them are prevalent all over the place. So like you won't catch me going out into the woodwoods, or if I do, I'll stay on some kind of pathway, because I don't want to get caught in that. You can step in a hole, go for a hole, groundhog, break your ankle. Never know what you're going to run into out there. You go to southern Ohio, you got venomous snakes. It all just depends. So I'm very cautious. I even bought a pair of gaiters, for venomous snakes in southern Ohio.
Yeah, getting lost. I had a friend of mine, a very good military man, get lost, and it was not a good situation for him. And so now he always brings 3 compasses, because he said the one compass, okay, if that dies, then there's the other one, but then you don't know if that one's not working right, so you have to have the 3rd compass. And so that could be a really scary situation. And I remember going out with him once, and I'm like, well, how do you know that we're not lost? And he pulls out a glow stick and he hung it in the tree, and so that we knew which way to come back because we saw the glow stick up there and stuff. But so that's a big hazard. Twisting your ankle, especially if you're by yourself. That's the most dangerous thing, is to go out by yourself, or if you get a snake bite or something terrible happens, get attacked by an animal or something. But mostly what I run into is poison ivy. Just be mindful of the poison ivy, because that's the most dangerous thing I've really run into. It's just when you forget, you're like all excited, you're going somewhere, and all of a sudden you stop and you look around, you're like, oh, now I'm right in the middle of it. So get back out.
Well, Michigan's pretty safe compared to some states as far as wildlife. Black bear are probably the most dangerous thing. Coyotes after that. If you get up north enough, wolves, and the DNR denies it, but cougars, there's mountain lions reported. There used to be mountain lions reported in every county in Michigan. We only have one venomous snake, which is a Massasauga rattler.
Don't be stupid, especially like me. And I will only speak about my own personal stupidity. I've jumping off, 10-foot rock faces and down, and one time I threw my bag down and it ended up floating down the creek with my night vision in it, so I had to jump into the creek, and the creek was big and wide, so not a little creek, you were talking 40 feet wide or whatever, and it started flowing down, so then I had to get into the creek and walk out. I was wandered off from the group. It was lights out, and when they caught up to me about 10 minutes later, I was standing on a rock in beautiful moonlight looking at this wonderful waterfall, and didn't pay attention where my feet were or anything else like that. And a copperhead was in between my feet, and I'd stood there for 10 minutes. Or once you get a thermal hit and you think it might be a Bigfoot, so you go run after it, and it turns out to be a bear, and it starts crying. Yes, I've chased a bear and made it cry. And it's Salt Fork over there off the Orange Loop. I pinned it with the 2 people I was with, and they didn't know it was a bear distress call, and I said, we're gone. So the biggest thing you have to do is watch out for your environment and yourself. And let alone we won't get into ticks, you know, and all of the creepy crawlies and stuff like that that could happen. And then you have people, because I've come up on places through the years where they had, you know, before marijuana was legal in the state of Ohio, people would have grow plots. And you come up and all of a sudden you're seeing signs like, hey, you don't want to be here, and you go. I mean, I ran into a portable meth thing, and that was in Virginia down in a park. And it was all the way at the end of this trail that nobody ever goes, and there was the cook station for meth. So you have to watch out for, you know, I would say the environment first, people second.
People, the only thing. People with bad intent. Be very specific when you're in the woods. Make sure you're not going on private property. Oh, and if you do need to go on private property, simply go knock on a door and ask if you can get permission. Most people are going to be really up to it and not have a problem. There's an app that I love. It's called Onyx Hunt, O-N-X Hunt. You can use it, like I have the Ohio, I use it for my tree business and everything, but I also use it for Bigfoot too. So hey, John Smith owns this land. He lives over in the town over here at this address. Go to his house. Hey, I'm with Big Trees, Ohio, blah, blah, blah. You have a huge oak. Oh yeah, sure, go. Can I come with you? Yes, and you know, stuff like that. And you can do the same thing with Bigfoot. Just get permission. Don't trespass.
I think there's more dangers, to be quite honest about it, from humans than what there are animals. You want to hear the story about Thomas Dillon and I? You know who Thomas Dillon was. You don't know who Thomas Lee Dillon? Oh, Thomas Lee Dillon was called the Ohio Outdoorsman Killer. He was a serial killer that killed 5 guys that were just minding their own business, walking or fishing. And back in the early 90s, before they captured Thomas Dillon, myself and 3 other guys were in an area in Coshocton County walking around 1.5 miles away from our vehicle. And thank God, and this is why I always say, don't go by yourself. I had 2 guys that were with me that were brothers that were loaded to the teeth with sidearms and rifles. They weren't afraid to shoot at anything. That's why they go with me. Because I don't want a bear coming at me. I want it laying on the ground when it starts charging me. So we're out there, and we got to this point, and we're walking around, and we start heading back, and it's a long, narrow path that's gone downhill, and this guy's coming up this path, and the one kid with me says, hey, stop him and ask him where his hunting license is at. I said, I'm not going to do that. You don't know who you're talking to. Well, he walks past us. He's dressed in camo, head to toe, and I mean head to toe. He had a camo hat on. He had the hunting yellow glasses on, and he was dressed in camo all the way down to the feet with the hunting boots or whatever on, military boots. He had a sidearm on his waist, and he had a rifle in his hand. We walked past him, speak to him. Cold stare at all of us. Never said a word, never nothing. He just kept on walking. We got far enough away from him as we went down the hill. The next thing we know, we hear bang, 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 bang. He opened up on something. So we're thinking he's shooting at whatever. No big deal, because we don't know who it was. We get down to our vehicles, we see a red pickup truck. Again, who cares? Guess what Thomas Dillon drove? A red pickup truck. That's why you go in the woods with somebody else. And for, you know, there is a CCW in Ohio now, and you can, you know, but are there dangers? Yeah, there's dangers. You might step in somebody's trap that you don't know is laying there, or fall down. I can't tell you how many times I've fallen down hills.
Research into the potential existence of a creature like Sasquatch is something that can be done in a variety of ways. From the reading of classic accounts in newspapers and books, to scanning current sightings posted online. As important as it is to study, compile information, and analyze patterns, there remains a significant need to move the inquiry forward through direct observation. Therefore, it's worth asking, is fieldwork necessary? And if so, why?
I think fieldwork is necessary no matter what you're looking for. I'm a Ohio certified volunteer naturalist. So if I'm helping, to keep an eye on bluebird nests or whatever it is that we're looking for, whatever type of an animal, you need to get out there in the field. That's how you learn about the animals. And you cannot, if I am in charge of like an eagle count, a bald eagle count or something like that, I can't count if I'm not out in the field, so you're gonna miss so much. When it comes to Bigfoot, the number one, I believe this is still the case, the number one source of sighting reports are roadside crossings. So you're not necessarily out in the field, but you are in the right place at the right time. But still, a lot of sightings also come from being out in the woods, being out in the countryside, being out where they live. If you're not out there, you're not going to see one. And I think that you can never underestimate the importance of getting out into nature and being able to know the difference between a double bear step and what could possibly be a Bigfoot print. Okay, here's a barred owl and some monkey chatter, or what's that noise? We don't know. Or this is hair I've seen before, it's coyote hair, it looks like a dog's hair, and this is something I've never seen before. So field work helps cut down on the time and effort that you put into things like that. Now I know what a dying bear sounds like, so I'm not going to put hours into trying to figure that out anymore. So if you're not putting in the time into field work, then you are going to be wasting a lot more time.
Well, probably to keep tabs to see if there's still any fresh evidence, like you might find broken, twisted trees, but they've been there for 10 years. Is there anything new? Is there footprints? Are there any new tracks? Anything that's not been seen years ago, it just showed up recently.
If you do field work in an area where somebody claims to have had a sighting and you don't go out and investigate it, what's the sense in taking the report to begin with? You're not doing any good for the research. If you're going to sit home, type up the report and stick it in the computer under the file of Bigfoot sightings, but you didn't go, why not? Why are you in the field to begin with? If you don't go out there and look for the possibility of the hares alongside the tree in Harrison County, of the tracks going up the hill in Carroll County, I mean, it's just like, that's a no-brainer.
If you don't have somebody in the field, it's the old adage, does a tree when it falls in the wood make noise if you're not there? I mean, to have a Sasquatch experience, you have to have a couple of things that are both pretty rare. You have to be in the right spot, it has to be in the right spot, and something else has to happen at that point in time for either the two of you to know that the other one's there. When that comes down to, if you think about that, that's a pretty small number.
We have this phrase we have at the American Legion in Loudonville during mushroom season. You're not going to find any sitting on a bar stool. So, I mean, you got to be out there. You definitely have to be out there. Because, I mean, if you're not out there, I understand some people can't get out there. But there's other ways you can support, okay, if you can't get out there, can you help review my audio for me, that kind of thing. But that's the best way your field work improves, is by spending time out there, and hours and hours and hours.
While out in nature, there are basic essentials one should always carry, such as water and a communication device. When adding the additional layer of searching for Sasquatch into the equation, that list expands to include other necessities, some of which are examples of creative ingenuity and good old-fashioned common sense.
What kind of equipment do you suggest people bring with them when they go out in the field?
A thermal imager. And they have good ones now that you can get for under $1,000. Definitely a thermal imager. You know, you have to have two sources of light. Red, preferably, because so your eyes can adjust to what you're looking at around you. I never go anywhere without an audio recorder. That's just kind of like my safety blanket. Because even if you don't see anything, you're going to hear something a lot easier than you'll, you know, see it.
Of course, bring plenty of water. Make sure you have, like Randall and I, my buddy Coyote, we always have snake bite kits. You never know, you're right. Not that the snakes can kill you in the state, they can make you sick. You can extract the venom out, you know, put some kind of, treatment wrap on it to, cut the blood flow off and everything like that. Also, a small backpack just with some sensible things, just like a little bit of protein, nutrition, water, things like that. Also, what I always tell people to do, if you're gonna go out doing a Bigfoot thing during the day, you know what you do? Everyone has loved ones, family of some sort. Drop a pin on Google Earth where you're standing, where you park, shoot off a text to, hey, ABC, hey, this is where I'm going in right now, and here's your timestamp. If you don't hear from me, they know where you were parked, and it begins from there. So even when I walk property for people, if they're not home, I drop a pin right in their driveway, and I can wander aimlessly, even on 200 acres, not even knowing my direction, but guess what? I can see my path on where my pin is, where I walk the whole distance, and just walk back to the pin, and you'll get there.
Equipment to take as you go out would have to include something that would record audio, something that would record video, or at least a very good camera. I think you will have to determine the level of self-defense that you want to take out with you, but in some cases that may be a very wise choice, depending on what other wildlife are known to be out and about at the time. Don't go out just thinking, hey, I'm in a state park, nothing bad could ever happen to me. Be wise about that. And as old school as I know this sounds, take a notebook and a pen or a pencil so that you can immediately write down things as they happen. Or, you can always put that in your notes on your iPhone, but that could fail. Or if you're shaken up in the moment, you might not be able to work everything exactly the way you want to. The plus side is that you can also sketch things. You can sketch physical details of an area that you're visiting to make it easier to go back and see it again or compare it. Now obviously, if you have a camera, you can do that too. But you just never know when you might need to write something down. I think a pad of paper and a pencil goes a long way to securing that. If you know what you're doing, it's a good idea probably to have plaster of Paris and a way of making a cast. That can be problematic if you're only in a given area for X amount of time and you don't know that you can return, because that has to set. And if you don't think you're coming back, there's probably no point in casting a track. That's where you'd want to take a good high-resolution photo of the track and put something with scale. A tape measure as well would probably be a wise thing to take with you as you go out.
My cell phone's my #1 friend. That's it, because it's light and easy. Yes, I've got the tripods, I got the thermal, all that kind of stuff. But when it comes down to it, the cell phone with the filters on it, because sometimes you'll find heavy footprints. You'll find them in the riverbank, an inch down, and you'll jump up and down and you won't be able to make an imprint. So and then you'll find different sizes and everything. But then sometimes you'll find the faint ones and you'll be unsure, and you can add the filters to a picture, and then you can see the toes. Then you can see it go around the heel. So to me, the cell phone now is the #1 friend.
Well, whatever you've got. I mean, I never had money enough to buy some of these gadgets. It was pretty much just take a tape measure if you found some tracks. When I first started doing it, I didn't even have a cell phone. You know, it was take a camera with me, 35 millimeter camera. And there were times that we actually found tracks and didn't have a tape measure, but put the old dollar bill down there next to it. I was guilty, like a lot of people are. There were some tracks that we found. We didn't have anything down there because we didn't know we needed to do that, you know, to show for size. And I've had a lot of people submit tracks, pictures of tracks to me, and I suggest, you know, carry a little pocket tape measure or at least a dollar bill, because that's 6 inches long, and that'll give you an idea and gives the viewer, the reader of the book or whatever the picture's on, you know, how big the thing was. Let them stick their foot down there. Well, I don't know how big their foot is, so that doesn't really help me.
Night vision binoculars, the batteries don't last long, and the closest thing is in focus. You can manually focus it, but it's hard to see deep into the forest with it. I have a $200 thermal, you know, that, you know, connects to my phone. It's not as nice as like a $1,000 thermal or more, but you can see heat anyway. I always have my auto recorder, a little knife. You know, I don't own a gun. I'm not against guns, but yeah, I mean, it's sometimes nice when someone's armed. If that dogman thing exists, I really wish I had a gun. What else? Headlamps, various other flashlights, bear spray. I have a whole like kind of utility vest thing I wear. Flag vest, I don't know what they're called. I just have, instead of a backpack full of stuff, I just have everything in the pockets. Even an air horn blaster thing I've heard can deter things like Bigfoot. I always have a GoPro on my chest. I do have a little light connected to it, but it doesn't, you know, shine very far at night. So a lot of times I don't even turn it on at night, but I still have it on me. But I can still use it for day research, recon or whatever. And I have a little point and shoot Panasonic that's 4K, you know, so I can zoom in and stuff on the other side of a river or something. That's just what I carry personally. I'm sure I'm leaving something out. Tweezers, little paper envelopes for air samples. I don't usually carry it with me. I usually, maybe it's not smart to do. I just don't like carrying a backpack. I like to be a little lighter. I usually go all the way back to the car for my plaster, but it's always in the car at least. And I have, I can scan things, do 3D scans with my phone, and someday I'm hoping to get a 3D printer and print from my 3D scans. So you have the opposite of a plaster cast. You could put plaster inside that, I suppose.
There is great benefit to being familiar with one's research location when out in the field. It may be exciting to chase a recent report in a new unfamiliar environment, but it's even more beneficial to have a working familiarity with your surroundings before stepping out of your car. Consulting a reliable map is just the beginning of an investigator's due diligence, ensuring that one makes it home to continue the search for another day.
I think it'll help you if you know, first of all, you want to know what to look for. When I first started going out and looking, our eyes were glued to the ground, you know, looking for tracks. Well, we didn't know. Well, look up in the trees, you know. Look for something broken, like the guy riding the horse out the lane and seeing all these little trees that were snapped off and hanging, you know, all the way out through there. If that had been me and I'd been looking at the ground, I'd have walked right under that, never even seen it. So, you know, if you're familiar with it and you notice something is not that way, like I had a picture of these deer hunters sent me. They had a lease, a hunting lease, and I think it was in Kentucky. And they were the only ones on this property, according to them. And they had activity from sounds and smells and something coming around at night and something big and heavy. And they sent me a picture of a tree, a branch laying down like that, and there's a big rock up on top of it. And they said, now none of us put that rock there, and there's nobody else on this because it's way down in the woods. So how'd that rock get there? And I said, well, I could only guess, but the wind didn't blow it there. Something with a hand and an opposable thumb has picked it up and put it up there, but I don't know why. Maybe it's sending the hunter a message, this is my home, respect my home, or I'll throw this and hit you in the head with it or something. But they noticed that it was out of place. It hadn't been there before.
It makes it all worthwhile when you hear that one knock that is just like a power home run knock, and you're like, oh, yes, or you hear a howl, and then you're like, that's why you do it, So it's you got to be out there and to understand the other animal sounds too, because there's time we were on an expedition once and we're walking down a trail, and all of a sudden this crazy racket was going on overhead. I'm like, what is going on? I didn't know that the turkeys roost up in the top of the trees. So that was something I learned. So there's an endless amount of things to learn when you're out in the field, and there's no lack of knowledge that isn't too good to be out camping with your friends.
I think there's an advantage to being familiar with the location that you're researching. It definitely helps if you're from the area and know the area, but it doesn't seem to take me long to get to know an area either. I guess it's home turf advantage, but I feel like I could figure out if there's footprints anywhere near pretty quickly in a new area as well.
Canadian newspaper editor John Green was pulled from his office by the force of curiosity. He never stopped being a man of letters, but he also became a field investigator in his own right, identifying tangible evidence in some of the most storied locations in Bigfoot lore. It's almost inevitable that those with similar curiosity will follow Green's pattern and will eventually find themselves in a forest somewhere, surrounded by the marvels of the natural world, hoping to discover the truth about one of the world's last great mysteries. Fortunately, there are countless opportunities for just such an experience in America's heartland.
This was in very early spring when this happened. About later when we were opening the pool, so that's late spring. My wife and I, it's about 4 o'clock in the morning, maybe a little later. We hear two huge, loud roars. It's a roar that you could feel. Our bedroom window, my wife likes it cold in the bedroom. She freezes me out. Anyway, he roared twice, and you could actually feel this roar. And that was the extent of it. I hadn't seen him or anything since then, except for about 6 years ago. And it got my interest, so I looked up, Bigfoots do walk on all fours sometimes. They do make this screeching sound that my fan belt. A lot of things fit this scenario. So anyway, and they do eat deer primarily. So what happened was, I'm getting on 271, I'm heading to a service call. I'm a repairman, by the way. And I see 3 young fawns running right towards traffic, roaring traffic. And I thought, that is so odd to see deer run towards traffic. Usually they run away. And so what happened, I looked at them, I looked into the woods, and there is Mr. Bigfoot. He's just standing there staring. That was the best picture I've seen of him. I wish I could have drove and taken a picture at the same time, but it was absolutely perfect. Exactly what people have said they've seen, with the cone-shaped head, totally black, and he was just fixated on those 3 deer. And it was mile marker, 105. That's where it happened, approximately within that area. And that was it. And that's my last experience. Hope to have more, but I'm not delivering newspapers anymore, so they're probably not going to happen.
That was mile marker 105 on what road?
Route 271 northbound.
This incident happened roughly around 2005, and it was in Cadiz, Ohio, and it was in the remote area. The property we were hunting was private land. It was between Carroll and Harrison County. Actually, in both counties, he owns property. So, very remote area. A guy I worked with, and he owned property, and it's never ever been hunted. And he's owned it for 30, 40 years, and gave me permission to go out there, written permission, and found it, went out there, bought a plat book to make sure, and very good bow hunting area for big bucks. So we were out there and we seen some big bucks, and we're hunting a really large buck, probably about 180, 90 inch. And I told my buddy I'm gonna go out there extra early to get on this deer. So I got out there at like 4:15 in the morning in my tree stand, and I'm sitting there and hung my bow up and just relaxing. And next thing you know, about an hour, not even an hour into it, I heard a scream yell that was so loud, but it was very far away. It freaked me out, woke me up instantly. I wasn't sleeping, but just, I'm like, what the heck was that? And my buddy was hunting on the other side. I don't know if he was out there, but that was such a hilly terrain. I don't think he actually heard it because he was down in the valley and I was more up on the ridge. And from that point on, it was freaked me out about that area, because then I started looking into all the sightings out there. And when we're out there for a week, we only had about 2 to 3 cars drive by. And make a long story short, he didn't hear it. And about a year or 2 later, I was up in the Upper Peninsula bear hunting, and my bear guide puts us out very far, and I walk another 1.5 miles, and up there, not to change the subject, but on the 3rd night, you always hear the coyotes, then the wolves, and then on the 3rd night, that went on as it's getting dark, and I'm going with a bow. I bow hunt only, everything. I heard almost the same scream yell, and it shut down the whole woods instantly. And I freaked out because, it just shut everything down. So I had waited till dark, and I walked 1.5 miles back, talked to my bear guide, and he started talking about everything. And that's how it all came around to with the one in Ohio and the one up there. So the one in Ohio, though, was a little bit further away. The one in the UP was closer, but it was still far, but it sounded like it was very, very powerful, whatever it was. And sort of freaked me out. And I've been hunting since I was 5, and never heard anything like that in the woods. I don't want to freak you out again, but there's another person that I know through him that I haven't met yet, but I've hunted their property, and that was back in the late 70s. It was a pig farm. The guy was from Vietnam, and he retired. He got out of the military, became a truck driver, and he was a pig farmer, and he backs up to Ottawa National, 120 acres, and they had these pigs, and I go there all the time, freaked out, because it's all abandoned. So his wife, after years living there, was saying something is taking the pigs. And he's like, are you kidding me? You go out there and count them. It kept on happening during the fall, always during the fall. So then he stayed at home, or he was at home, and he's sitting on his porch with a cup of coffee, a shotgun, a light, and a dog. And middle of the night, like 1 in the morning, here's the pig squealing. He goes running out there, and I've been there. I'm 6'3", whatever, 4. And he said something had 2 pigs stepping over the barbed wire fence, which is still there because it's on oak post like this big, and the barbed wire is that far apart, and it's about this high. And it stepped over the fence and disappeared. By the time you guys got up, my bear guide knows that person. They passed away, but they called Hank in the morning and said, "We're done. We're moving back down state. Can you watch our place?" Now, I could take you there right now. I used to have photos of all, they left their cars. They took one van, packed up everything and moved. They shot all the pigs the next morning, called my bear guide and left. And everything is still there. There's still like clothesline with wire with old, everything's still in the house. It's like abandoned perfect, but the son just retired out of the military and he's building a new house on that property. So I call it the Bigfoot farm because it is eerie. And right towards the back of the property, I was just there, there's a drop off going down to a creek or a river, and it has to be 450 feet. And I think that's where it travels through there without being seen and noticed. But I've been out there, and it's different, different vibe. So, yeah.